Welcome to Author Life Podcast, where myself and guest authors share their stories, offer tips and advice, and share our writing, publishing, and marketing knowledge. I'm your host, Delcherie Gladden. Hello everyone, my name is Delcherie Gladden. Today we're going to start off with one of the most important yet aggravating parts of publishing and writing, and that is the query letter. So today I'm going to be giving some tips and tricks, some advice on writing a good query letter and how to handle the whole query process without going completely crazy, because that can totally happen. So the query writing process incorporates some of the most frustrating aspects of publishing, but it's necessary no matter what publishing track you're planning to take, be that traditional, hybrid, or independent. This is going to be an important aspect of getting your marketing plan ready and getting your book ready to send out to readers, agents, and publishers. So, what is a query letter? For those who are new to this process or new to writing in general, a query letter is basically your pitch to agents, readers, and publishers. And there's all kinds of technical definitions out there. One of my favorites comes from Jane Friedman. She is the CEO and co-founder of Open Road Integrated Media, and this is what she had to say about your query letter. The purpose of a query letter is to seduce the agent or editor into reading or requesting your work. The query is so much of a sales piece that you should be able to write it without having written a single word of the manuscript. And sometimes that's very useful in just helping you wrap your head around your overall story. But when you come down to the very basics of it, your query is your pitch to anybody who you want to read your manuscript, whether that's an agent, a publisher, or a reader. So let's go over kind of some of the most basic information that you need as you're starting this process of writing your query letter. A query letter should be 1 page, no longer than that. People get a little testy about 4-page query letters. It is your pitch to sell your book, like I said, and that is to readers or to an agent or publisher you're hoping to contract with. It's also a professional letter. This needs to be done in the same format you would use if you were addressing a letter in your personal work life. And an important thing to remember when putting together your query letter is that this is most likely your first interaction with either a reader, publisher, or agent, and you want it to be a good impression. And one last really important bit about query letters: before you send out query letters, your book or project needs to be completed. Agents and publishers don't like getting query letters for unfinished manuscripts. So keep that in mind. Now, as you're starting to think about this whole process, it can be very overwhelming. How do you sift through the billions of search results that you're going to get when you type in agent or publisher? There are a few tools that have been very helpful to me personally and to other authors that I work with. Some of those are Query Tracker and Agent Query. Both of these, you make an account, you use their databases to search for agents based on different criteria, for publishers as well on Query Tracker. And then you can track your responses, which ones you've sent queries to, which ones you've heard back from. So it's a really great way to keep organized. You also have the Publishers Marketplace. You can go to look up a specific agent or publisher, see what their most recent contracts have been, what type of book they're interested in. It can be a really great resource. Also, I would recommend Predators and Editors. And Predators is spelled Preditors, to match with Editors. This is a great resource for finding out an agent or publisher's reputation, how they've worked with other authors, whether they're a legitimate company, things like that. So it's a good resource for checking out what that experience might be with their agency or publishing house. Another one that I have come across more recently, thanks to a fellow author that mentioned it, is dark markets. And this is mainly going to be for short stories and magazines that you're interested in submitting to, rather than full-length novels. Some other great resources in helping you research agents and publishers are agent interviews. You can get to know them, get to know more specifically what they're looking for at that time. You get a little bit more info than just what's posted on their page on their company website. Also, when you're looking, be as specific as possible. If you just type in young adult agents or young adult publishers, you're going to get a ton of results. If you narrow that down by your subgenre of young adult dystopian or paranormal romance or literary fiction, that's going to help narrow down some of your search results so you're not sifting through a bunch of information that is not helpful to you. And the last one I'm going to mention is social media stalking. Please don't really stalk people. But it's a great idea to follow an agent you're interested on Twitter or like their page on Facebook and get to know their personality, see what they're posting about, whether they're looking for things specific to what you're writing, and just their personality in general to see if it's someone you think you're going to be a good fit with. Now, back to the actual query writing process. Let's go over the parts of a query letter. I'm going to break this down into 3 major parts of the query letter. Paragraph 1 is going to be the hook. So you're going to include more than just your hook in this first paragraph, but that's going to be the part that you're going to be focusing on a lot. So you want to start out paragraph 1 with your personalized introduction. And it should be personalized, whether you've met this agent or publisher in real life, or if you have just spent time researching them and found a connection that you can bring up. Next, you want to give them your book details. And this really doesn't need to be more than 1 sentence. This is not where you're going to explain your book. This is where you're going to tell them, I have a contemporary romance that is 76,000 words long, etc. You're going to give them the basic details so they can glance at that and say, yes, that's something I'm interested in. No, that's not even something I represent. So just give them the basics there. And then following that is going to be your hook. And this is where you're going to give them a 1 to 2 sentence pitch for your book that tells them why your book is different from all of the other books in the genre you just mentioned. And we'll go over that in a little more detail in just a minute. Now, in paragraph 2, this is where you're going to have your mini synopsis. And this may end up being more than 1 paragraph. You may have 2 paragraphs. If you go more than 2, that might be getting a little bit long. So remember, you want to fit this on 1 standard page. Whether you're putting it in an email or not, everything in your query letter should fit on 1 printed page. So this is basically, if you're thinking about the back cover copy of a book and that summary there, that's your idea here for what you're going to shoot for. And again, we'll discuss that a little bit more detail in just a minute. So your last paragraph is going to have your bio, your publishing credits or awards, and if you don't have any, that's okay. And then make sure that you tell them thank you before you close your letter. Whether they are interested in your manuscript or not, they've still taken the time to review it and hopefully send you a response. So it's just polite. Give them a quick thank you. Let them know your manuscript is available upon their request if they do decide to want it. Now, let's go over those 3 paragraphs in a little bit more detail to help you kind of break down what you need to do and where to focus your time. So let's start back again with paragraph 1 in the introduction. How do you personalize your query letter, even if you've never met this person in real life? Basically, you want to tell them why you're querying this agent. And hopefully it's not just because I did a random search and came up with your name, I'm going to query you. Hopefully you have a more personalized reason than that. Have you met them somewhere? At a conference maybe? Ran into them at the grocery store? Mention if you've met them. Give them a quick reminder, but don't dwell on it. Or maybe you got an invitation or a request through something like Pit Madness or some other event where you talked to them and they asked you to send something to them specifically. Be sure to mention that. They may not remember because they probably met a lot of people. And also, if you've researched their agency or publishing house, that should have given you an idea of why you think your book will fit. Maybe it's because your book is similar to other books they represent, or they are an expert in your particular genre. Make sure to mention the reason that your research led to you saying, yes, I'm going to query them. And lastly, you may have been referred by someone else you know. Maybe a fellow author is represented by them or has books published with them. They've said good things. Go ahead and mention that. Say that's a reason that you're looking into them for representation. Now, as far as personalizing, getting down to the details of that, after you make sure that the agent or publisher knows why you've chosen their agency, make sure you take the time to get the details right. Don't open with Dear Agent or Dear Publisher. They will most likely automatically delete your email. Use their name or make sure you spell it correctly so that they know you've at least taken that much time to address them properly. And do not send the same query letter to 24 agents through carbon copy. They will know you did that. They will also delete your email. So just make sure you're finding a connection, you're taking care of the details, and be professional in your letter. Use professional language. So as far as the book details, what do you want to put in that quick breakdown of what you're offering to them? Like I said, keep it simple. It should all be in one sentence. You want to give them the title, the word count, the genre, and the age group. You may also need to mention setting or time period if you are writing historical fiction, so they have that in mind. Now, let's talk about the hook. Your hook has 3 elements. You need to have your character plus your conflict, the choices or the stakes that are going to be in the book, and what some people like to refer to as the sizzle. This is going to be what sets your book apart, why it's different than every other vampire paranormal romance out there. And like I said, you may also need to bring into play the setting or the time period if that is integral to your book. So hook versus heart is something that sometimes gets confused. Your hook is what makes your book stand out. It's not necessarily the heart of your story or what you're hoping readers take away from your story. That is going to be more in your mini summary. This right here is just to get their attention. Your hook is usually 1 sentence, possibly 2, but you want to keep it as concise as possible. And in your hook, don't tell them the ending. In your whole query letter, don't tell them the ending. That is for the synopsis or for when they request a full manuscript. With the hook, it's just that little tidbit to get them interested. So there are some great examples of hooks. I'll read a couple of examples for you from 2 popular books. One of them is The Bridges of Madison County. And his hook reads, when Robert Kincaid drives through the heat and dust of an Iowa summer and turns into Francesca Johnson's farm lane, looking for directions, the world-class photographer and the Iowa farm girl are joined in an experience that will haunt them forever. So here he gives you a little bit about the characters, the setting, and what problems they're going to face. We don't know the problem specifically, but we know it's going to have a lingering effect on them. And that's important. And the other example I'm going to give you is from The Kite Runner, and it reads, an epic tale of fathers and sons, of friendship and betrayal, that takes us from Afghanistan in the final days of the monarchy to the atrocities of the present. So this one as well gives you just a very brief glimpse of who the characters are, their relationship, and what the circumstances they're in and how they're going to affect the characters. Just enough to get you interested, but neither one tells you how the story resolves. Now on to paragraph 2. This is your mini synopsis. So again, this is similar to what you would read on the back cover of a paperback book. Now you want to shoot for this to be in length about 100 to 250 words. If you get much longer than that, you're going to have trouble fitting it all onto one page. So this is where you really need to be concise and focus on the important aspects of the story, not the details. So you're going to start with your hook and basically expand on that. You want to give a little bit more about the main characters, explain in a little bit more detail what the problems and conflicts are that your characters are going to face, and how this adversity is going to change or affect them. And a great resource for writing a really good mini synopsis is to pick up some books from your bookshelf and just start reading the backs of them. Look at them critically and think about what aspects of the summary get you interested and make you want to read the book, and then use that in your own writing. Now, on to paragraph 3. This is going to be your bio. So a lot of new authors are intimidated by writing this portion because they may not have a whole lot to say, and that is totally okay. If you want to skip the bio entirely, that is okay as well. Some people will do that. If you just want to give a very brief breakdown, who you are, where you live, etc., that is fine too. Things that you do want to include are things that make it meaningful to the query. Does it have something to do with your professional writing career? If not, go ahead and leave it out. You also want to show some personality here. Give the agent or publisher a little bit of taste of who you are and what you're about. Keep this short. So I've seen some query letters where the author bio is as long as the mini synopsis. You want to try to avoid that. This should be a very short, concise paragraph that gives the basic details of you and your work. So keep it writing related. Keep out all the personal stuff that does not contribute to showing that you are a writer to be taken seriously. So you do want to include your education, any work experience that's relative, especially if you're writing nonfiction or about a particular location or topic. Personal experience as well that relates to the project or to writing in general. And any extensive research that you've done, whether this is on your own time or through an academic or work pursuit. So as part of paragraph 3, after you do your bio, you also want to include your publishing credits or awards. And this again for new writers can be intimidating if they don't have a lot to put in this section. That's okay. If you don't have anything, don't include it. You don't need to point it out because not having it there basically already says that for you. So you do want to include, though, any awards that you've won, and where they came from, what the award was. And don't be modest, but don't go overboard. You know, if it's something from 2nd grade, that might not be relevant now. So you might want to leave that one off. Publishing credits. Be really specific here. And this is not just books you've written. This may be journals, online or trade magazines. If you can, give them the title, give them the magazine when you were published in that. So if they do choose to look it up, they can do that pretty easily. And again, if you are unpublished, you don't have any credits to your name, that's okay. Go ahead and just leave this part out. And sometimes nonfiction writers who have started writing fiction will leave off their nonfiction credits because they don't think it applies, even though it may not be any proof saying, yes, I can write fiction. You still know the process of writing and publishing. You've been through it. So that gives them a little bit more confidence that they're going to be able to work with you easily. Things not to include are things such as that maybe you write your church newsletter, you do the mom letter at your kid's school to send home to parents. Things like that, while they are awesome and people appreciate that you do that, they're not necessarily relevant to your professional writing career. So some of those things, go ahead and leave those out of your publishing credits section. Now, the question often comes up as far as publishing credits is whether or not to include self-publishing projects. This is one that it's going to be up to you to decide. Sometimes it depends on the timing. You're going to discuss this with an agent or publisher eventually because those books are out there or there's still a record of them even if you've pulled them. So it's going to be something that you'll need to discuss with them. Having been self-published before, if you're now going the traditional route, that does not hurt you at all. There was a time when that was different, but now agents and publishers both are much more open to picking up authors who have previously been self-published. So just be confident when you mention it. Talk about it whether it was a success or a failure. If your self-published project did not do well, be prepared to talk about why and what you learned from that. If you consider it a mistake to have self-published or you feel it's irrelevant because it's not related to what you're writing now, that may be a time when you're just going to leave it out and not mention it. It may come up later, but if it's not pertinent to what you're doing now, it just may not be anything that's going to sway anybody one way or the other. Some people will ask, does being self-published make you a more desirable client? In and of itself, not necessarily. It depends on the success. So if you have self-published a book or project of some kind, give them details to where they can look at that. What are the rankings? What are your sales numbers? How long has it been on sale? How many reviews do you have? That sort of thing that will help give them confidence in saying, yeah, they took the self-published route, they're looking to change, but they put a lot of effort into this in the first place, and so that gives them confidence that you're going to continue to work hard to further your writing career. Success to agents and publishers may be a little bit different than you personally looking at it as success. Kind of the rule of thumb I've heard and seen in quite a few articles is kind of the 5,000 sales mark. And I was just recently at a conference and an agent there, Angie Hodop, mentioned that when they're looking for success, when they're defining success of a self-published or traditionally published novel, that number can jump up to 10,000 copies. And that is per month, not per year. So that can vary widely depending on who you're talking to, but either way, talk about it, give them some statistics that they can look at and work with. So last thing for paragraph 3, before we get to the closing, is what not to mention in your query letter as you're wrapping it up. Unless you've been asked specifically by an agent or publisher, or unless you have a lot of followers on social media, what accounts you have on social media is not something you need to put in your query letter. More likely than not, they'll Google you and they'll see what social media you're on and how active you are and what followers you have. So that's something that they're going to do when they're scoping you out. It doesn't need to be mentioned in a query letter unless it is specifically asked for, or unless, you've got like 100,000 followers on Twitter, and that's pretty cool. So otherwise, go ahead and leave that out. You also do not need to mention your marketing plan. That's something that you're going to discuss at a later date, once they've shown interest in your project. So for now, go ahead and leave that out. Also, you don't need to mention the years of effort and dedication that you've put into writing. Hopefully your work will reflect how much work and dedication you've put into your writing. You don't need to say so. Also, family and friends' opinions, do not mention them at all. Even if they are honest and they really did love your book, people are always going to look at that as, well, yeah, but it's your mom. So go ahead and leave that out. It doesn't hold as much water as maybe you would hope it would. Also, you don't need to mention any past rejections or near misses. You almost signed a contract with so-and-so. It didn't happen, so it's not relevant. Go ahead and leave that out as well. Also, don't apologize. Don't apologize that you're a new author or that your previously published book didn't do so well. Don't apologize in your query letter. Whatever has happened in the past, you're looking at moving forward and either making a fresh start or continuing to build your career. And on the flip side, try not to compliment your work. They know that you love your book, otherwise you wouldn't have written it, you wouldn't be submitting it. Try not to talk it up beyond just telling them about it and giving them a really great reason to want to read your book. Leave out any self-compliments. And along with that, please do not discuss how much money you think your book will make, because you are probably wrong, for one. Unfortunately, I think we all have unrealistically high expectations when we start out. And that's something you can't guarantee it. They can't guarantee it. It's a non-issue. What happens will happen. So wrapping up paragraph 3, the last thing you're going to have is your thank you and your closing. So remember, thank the agent or publisher for their time and consideration for looking at your query. Let them know that the full manuscript is available upon request. Mention if your book is already being considered by someone else. It's just polite to say, I'm sending this to you, but HarperCollins or Susie Townsend has a copy right now and they're also looking at it. Make sure it's true. Don't say that if that's not really what's going on. But you want to let them know that there is something of a time limit for them, so they can have that in mind when they're looking at it and reviewing it. Also, it's good to mention whether you have a book that has a potential to become a series, or if you have already written consecutive books in the series, let them know kind of where that stands, or if it's a standalone. Also, don't forget to include your contact information basics, email address, phone number, things like that. You want them to be able to get in contact with you. And even though they can just hit reply to your email, it's still good to have that just in case. If you choose to offer an exclusive to an agent or publisher, make sure that it's a reasonable amount of time. Usually that's going to be 3 weeks, maybe a couple of months, but rarely longer than that, because you don't want your book tied up if someone else might be interested in it. And only compare your book to another book in terms of the style, the voice, the theme, not terms of how much money it's going to make. All right, so now we're going to get into some of the tips of writing a query letter. Now that you have down the basics, now you want to actually jump in and start writing this beast and make some progress on it. The blurb or the summary is going to be a huge part of your pitch, and it's usually going to require the most time and rewriting and attention and all of that. So we'll talk about that and kind of go over some tips and tricks for writing a query letter that will grab an agent or publisher's attention. So when should you write the blurb or the summary? It really depends on the author and their preferences. Some people will write it before they write the book or in the early stages of writing the book. Some people prefer to write it after the book is completed. As far as why you might want to write it beforehand, this can be helpful because at this point in the project, you're not as emotionally invested. So not every single detail feels important. And sometimes that's hard when you're writing a query, like, oh, but I've got to tell them about this part and this part. And your query ends up being 4 pages long. So this can be helpful when you're still kind of at the edges of the story. You can focus on the really important highlights, which can help you when you're actually writing the book because you have those important moments in mind and you can really highlight them. Also, just plain and simple, it saves you from having to do it later. So unless that works for you, some people work best under a deadline at the very last minute. Some people like to have everything ready ahead of time. So writing it beforehand might be better for you, might not be. Another benefit is that if you write it at the beginning of the project, you have that and you're ready to use it to promote the book, which can be helpful because you can never start promoting too early. Now, your other option is to write it after you've finished the book or the project. Benefits of doing this is that now you have the full concept in place. It's ready to go. You have all the story points. You can break it down and give them a concise picture of what the book is about. And it may help you avoid having to rewrite it later because you've had a plot change or character change or something like that. And at this point, you're going to have a better idea of what your future plans are, either for the book or the series, which can be helpful. So let's get into the anatomy of a blurb. You're going to have your situation and character intro. You're going to address the problem and the conflict. You need to give some sort of hope of resolution. And you want to keep in mind the tone or the mood you want to set in your blurb. So as far as the situation and the character introduction, you really want to jump in right away. Let them know who the story is about and what is going to happen in the story. Don't waste time with description or internal thoughts or talking about the moral of the story, things like that. Get right in there and tell them who and what the story is about. And you may also need to introduce the setting right off the bat too, if it plays an important part in the story. So, who is the story about? And what situation makes their story interesting? The first sentence should ideally introduce both, if you can. So, with characters, you want to make them as interesting as possible when you introduce them. You know your characters very well, better than anybody else. You need to present them in the best, most interesting light. An example of that I have from Seabiscuit by Laura Hillenbrand, and this is her introduction to her characters and situations. In 1938, a small crooked-legged racehorse received more press coverage than Hitler, Mussolini, Roosevelt, or any other news figure. So I think that does a pretty good job of highlighting the character and why his story is going to be interesting. And an important part to remember when you're introducing your characters especially is don't mislead the reader. If they start reading and the points you put in the blurb or the summary are not lived up to, they're going to put the book down and they're going to be dissatisfied with it. Now, on to addressing the problem or the conflict. You want to give a hint of the plot, not the whole plot. You want to show what challenge your main character is up against. And this is where you really need to simplify, because most likely your character is going to be facing multiple conflicts and multiple problems throughout the story. In the blurb, you want to focus only on the main conflict. You really don't have room to go into everything else. So focus on the main conflict in the story. And tell the person reading your query how the conflict is going to hurt or hinder your character. Again, simplify here as well. Pick the biggest, most detrimental effect to focus on in the blurb. Because again, there's going to be a lot of different effects, large and small. Pick the biggest, most detrimental effect to focus on in the blurb. Most likely they're going to have multiple effects, far-reaching, short-reaching. Just focus on that main effect that's going to hurt or hinder them throughout the story. As far as the conflict specifically, the blurb is a teaser. You need to hook the agent or publisher and leave them wanting to read more. This is better accomplished in a short blurb because then you don't have time or word count to meander off into subplots and what have you. Some people like to end their summary or their blurb on a question, such as Joanne Harris did with Chocolat, and hers reads, "As mouths water in anticipation, can the solemnity of the church compare with the pagan passion of a chocolate eclair?" And I just love that line, because it's so true. We all like chocolate. Now, that's not necessarily a rule. You don't have to end on a question. Stieg Larsson in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo ended his with this: Lisbeth Salander, outcast, enigma, avenger. Which has a very spooky feel, so I loved his as well. You want to end on a cliffhanger, because that is what is going to get your agent or publisher to say, yes, send me more, please. Now, after giving the characters and the conflict and everything that is going to ruin your characters' lives, basically, you want to make sure that you have some hope of resolution. You don't want to be too depressing, so we need some hope here. How are your characters or character potentially going to thwart all the trouble and conflict that is brewing? You don't want to tell them the resolution, but you want to give them that idea that there is some chance that they're going to get out of this or overcome this. So don't reveal the end of the story, but do suggest a possible escape. Make readers want to solve the problem along with your character. Now, as far as the tone or mood of your blurb, this should match the book. If you're writing something dark and spooky, you want to get that feel in your blurb as well. You don't want to be, joking and silly when in reality your book is about some pretty serious topics. So keep in mind the tone of your book and try to match that in your query, whether that's funny, dark, moody, silly, inspirational, etc. We want it to match so readers know what's in store for them. Now, there are some great examples of blurbs out there. I won't take the time to read them because they're quite long, but I would recommend looking at The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt and The Girl on the Train by Paula Hawkins. Both of those are really great examples of really good blurbs that get readers interested and make them want to pick up the book. Now, a few more of your blurb writing tips that I wanted to give you is 1, research. Like I said before, pick up books, especially books in your genre that you're writing in, and just read the backs of them. It'll give you a good idea of the style and format used in your genre, and it'll give you just good examples of character introductions, conflict introductions, setting, and tone. When you're writing your blurb, you want to direct it to your reader, and different readers require a different approach. You may have a slightly different blurb that you're sending out to an agent or publisher, and it might be not quite the same as what you'll put on the back of the book where it's directed to readers looking to purchase a book. So keep in mind your audience when you're writing your blurb. Also, give it time. You're going to rewrite, revise, start over, do it all again. You're going to do that many times. This is the most important part of your query because it's telling them about your book. So try not to rush it. If you end up redoing it 15 times, that's okay. Most writers will end up doing it like 100 times. Maybe not quite that many, but it feels like that. And when you're going through it, just cut out unnecessary words. Don't use up your limited space with words that do not help sell the book. Also, what can be really helpful is to get an outside opinion. And I would suggest 2 different groups that you'll want to contact to have a look at your blurb. First, you want someone who's read the book. They can make sure that you've included all the pertinent details and that you're staying true to the feel of your book, since they know it. But you also want to give it to someone who has never read your book at all. They're going to be able to tell you if it makes sense and if it's interesting to someone who's not already familiar with the world and characters. There are also some professional resources. There are paid services that will write your blurb for you if you choose to go that route, if you're really struggling with it. And there are also free services like the Query Shark. She runs a blog where she will take people's queries that they've sent her and she'll break them down, suggest changes to help make it stronger. And it's a really interesting experience. I've worked with her on her blog before and I found it very helpful. And just your last, most basic, most important tip for writing your blurb, please make sure you proofread it. Bad grammar, spelling mistakes, punctuation mistakes, that is going to turn off an agent or publisher very quickly. So make sure to proofread it really well. So now that you have your query ready and you're getting together your list of agents or publishers you want to send it out to, how do you keep track of everything? Because that can be a huge challenge. So some methods that have worked well for people, like I mentioned before, Query Tracker. Most of the options are free. You do need to make an account, but you can have just a basic free account. You can also do a paid premium account if you have more than one project and you have some different other things going on. It's up to you whether you want to do that or not. But that one is nice because you can keep track of which ones you've sent out, which ones you've gotten a response from, etc. Some people prefer just to write them in a notebook or make a Word file or an Excel sheet and just keep track of them that way. That can work just as well. If you're kind of unorganized like me, you might use sticky notes. I use sticky notes for everything, but it works, and somehow I mostly keep track of that. So basically just find a method that works for you so that you know who you've sent it out to, so you don't end up accidentally duplicating a query, and so you can kind of cross them off when you've heard back from them and mark down what kind of response you got. If you don't hear back after whatever amount of time they list on their website as their usual response time, go ahead and just mark them off as they've passed. Because some agencies and publishers, they get too many to respond to personally. So if you don't hear back from them, it's basically a no. And some people will ask kind of, should I follow up? They said they would respond in such and such time. I haven't heard from them. It depends on the agency or the publisher. Some of them will say on their website, hey, if you haven't heard from us, please shoot us a note and just give us a reminder. Others will specifically say, please do not try to contact us afterward, because they just get too much correspondence. So check with the agency or publishing house you're interested in and go by their guidelines as to whether or not to follow up. So another interesting aspect of the whole querying process is how fast or slow should you query people. And some people take the approach of they've got a list of 20 agents, they query them all at once, get it done with, send them all out. Some people will take their time and do it a little more slowly. Most people recommend that you query 3 to 4 agents or publishers a week. Why? Basically, if it's not working and you're getting a bunch of no's, you may want to make some changes before you send out your next round of queries. If you've queried all of your top picks at the same time, that was kind of your one shot. Now you've got to go to a different group. And some people ask, where do you start on your list, your dream list of agents or publishers? Do you query your top picks first, or do you start at the bottom and work your way up? And honestly, this is completely up to you. If you feel like maybe you're going to get some initial responses, then maybe make some changes. I would suggest starting at the bottom of your list and working your way up so that by the time you get to those really dream agents and publishers that you want to work with, you've had some time to perfect things a little bit more. But again, it is completely up to you on where you start, how fast or slow you go. Just keep in mind that you may want some feedback before you go 2 feet into the querying process. So I am going to wrap up the podcast now. Hopefully some of these tips and some of the breakdowns have been helpful to you in writing your query letter. If you have questions or you want to chat and discuss more about query letters and processes, please feel free to find me on Twitter or Facebook or my website. Just search Delsheree, Delsheree. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one, so it's pretty easy to find me. And just to leave you with a parting thought on query letters, you only get one shot with a query letter. So make it count. Put your time and effort into really perfecting this letter before you send it out. And just wish everybody good luck on their publishing journey. That's it for today. I will be back again with a new topic to share tips and tricks for writing and publishing. Thanks again for listening to Author Life Podcast. For more information on the podcast or guest authors, check out the links in the show description. If there's a topic you'd like to learn more about, find me online and send me suggestions anytime.